about the concepts of friendship and love. Contrasts between Aristotle and Kierkegaard. Author Jagson Teles Silva. Article recorded February 2, 2023, by Sybil Mann Baylor, for educational sharing. Abstract. This article presents the notions of friendship present in the Nicomachean ethics of Aristotle and unfolding of contrasts found in modern philosophy of Søren Kierkegaard, notably in the works of love. Despite the different times, both Aristotle and Kierkegaard asked questions aimed at understanding the relationship between men. That is, the perspective of both was to understand and justify the principles that guide human actions. At first we could ask how the conceptions of pagan may find echoes in the Christian philosophy of the Danish. But despite different cultural paradigms, we notice that ancient ethics are basic to the ethical religious conception of Kierkegaard. Keywords: Aristotle, Kierkegaard, friendship, love. The philosophical discourse on friendship and love has occupied throughout history of philosophy a prominent place. Since classical antiquity, treatises on ethics and at some point privileged the concept of friendship or love for base the principles that guide the relations between men. Aristotle notably was one of those thinkers who gave light to reflection on what probably keeps men together, in a perspective that is not only personalistic, but also political, understanding friendship as an indispensable condition for man's seek happiness. Kierkegaard will also think about friendship and love for base its ethical religious discourse, placing the individual as a fundamental when thinking about the ethics of the divine command of love. Both gave differentiated contours to the theme approached here, while the first was at a time when the subjective dimension of man had not yet been was neither thematized nor problematized. The second radically confronts the interiority, becoming one of the greatest thinkers of subjectivity. These distinct times, however, cross when we stop to analyze the notion of friendship or love, since the time of philosophy is not historical, but logical, and this is necessary since ancient philosophy is a constant presence in Søren's thinking. Kierkegaard. This constantly returns to pagan philosophy in the classical age to for demarcate what is proper to his Christian time, whether to reaffirm much of what had been said. In this work we seek to understand how the contours of the notions of philia in Aristotle and how his notions will reverberate in the modern philosophy of Kierkegaard. In the Nicomachean ethics, the problems proposed by Aristotle when thinking about friendship philia in classical antiquity did not end in a thought theoretical, as they are focused on action, and, therefore, it is not possible to find the univocal or even systematic concept in his analysis of friendship, given the ambivalent characteristics present in human nature. We can still risk that the Greek philosopher understood that friendship is not an abstract contemplative form, but rather, it is a power present in human nature that is effected in an activity, now permanent, sometimes momentary. In this way, he focuses on making a typology, the classification, and methodologically departs from empirical experiences in which the Fleeton theory is verified, so much so that even today we can understand friendship from the notions suggested by the Greek philosopher of the 4th century BC. The object of the Nicomachean ethics is not the investigation of the condition of possibility that establishes the relationship between individuals, as he will later think Kant, is also not the good as a pure and empty form as Plato theorizes, but beyond the horizon of his reflection are the actions that guide the pursuit of happiness, which is in itself a good and in which philia is a fundamental virtue that is always in movement, kinesis constituting, to a certain extent, the polis, since it is a virtue considered by Aristotle as a kind of link between individuals, and that thus guarantees unity in the polis. It is, therefore, due to the kinesis present in the relationships between individuals in the polis that a deductive conceptual fixity cannot guide a practical that requires a context. That is, time and space need to be placed in perspective when investigating the notions of philia in Aristotle. As a definition only formally and temporally logical is not capable of understanding human action with all your contingencies. We can say that philia is a fundamental virtue to achieve good living and consequently happiness. Here the investigation Aristotelian exposes three types of friendship that are related by similarity and have reciprocity as a condition and also reciprocity between the parties. That is, my friend needs to be aware that there is a relationship of reciprocal love between him and me and vice versa. Article recorded February 2, 2023, by Sybil Mann Baylor, for educational sharing. Aristotle begins his considerations on friendship by stating that it can be a virtue or imply virtue. This virtue is of paramount importance to life. It impels man to live and do good. It helps the youth to exercise fairly the actions and shelters the elderly from the ills of time. And when a man at the height of his age has the company of an equal, philia is of singular importance to jointly encourage them to practice good deeds and good thoughts. In short, it is a condition for the essential being of man to be achievable. Aristotle distinguishes what should be loved, and according to him, we love what is good, useful or pleasurable. Therefore friendship can be based on these three reasons, determining the three types of friendship: those in which agents have utility in mind, that is, they seek a common good, for example, prosperity in business. So is the one which has pleasure as its end. Both pursue ends that are not agents in themselves, but they have philia in view of another cause. In the latter case, for example, pleasant and mutual company. Aristotle 1984, page 1157b states that these species of friendships are inferior to those in which I wish my friend well for his own sake. The good they will be friends for their own sake, that is, on account of their goodness. That, for they are friends in the absolute sense of the term, and the others are accidentally. In this way, perfect friendship is one that is realized in goodness and that resides in well. This is the friendship between good men that has nothing else in view but the love that is enclosed in themselves. Remember that Aristotle structures friendship perfect characterizing as the one that takes place between two men of good character, or that is, morally good, who exercise their virtues in an excellent way and who also do not cease to be surrounded by the pleasant and the useful. In the words of the philosopher 1984, 1156b, 5-10. Perfect friendship is that of men who are good and like in virtue, for these wish each other equally well as good, and they are good in themselves. Now those who wish their friends well for them themselves are the most truly friends, because they do so of its own nature and not accidentally. That's why your friendship lasts while they are good, and goodness is a very durable thing. and each one is good in himself and to his friend, as the good are good in absolute and useful to each other. And in the same way they are pleasant. Indeed, friendship for utility or for pleasure, which can be said as imperfect and accidentally constituted, they are only sustained until the moment when the involved can obtain goods, even if these are apparent for. But when its good ceases to be obtained by one of the parties, the friendship ceases. Grade. For it is worth mentioning here that Aristotle identifies as an apparent good those who are useful and pleasant, inasmuch as these are a certain good. And of note. Article recorded February 2, 2023, by Sybil Mann Baylor, for educational sharing. As already mentioned, perfect friendship is present among the good, among those of virtuous character, who love each other, who are not friends by accident, but because they wish well to one another absolutely. In this way, Aristotle understands that this type of friendship is the most lasting, because in it is gathered the necessary qualities so that friends can maintain a relationship permanent as the similars that they are and where activity and thought tend towards the same side. Friendship also implies choice, because it is a mutual love, that is, I love the friend that I choose, since we have the disposition to do so. And the choice is given because naturally we are good and we will relate to each other in the good and for the good, because we love in view of ourselves and not in view of something useful or pleasurable, since love in itself also implies being pleasant and helpful to one another. The perfect friendship then, in addition to involving mutual reciprocity, it is based on the act of wanting good to others. Friend with a view to himself, however, reminds the Greek philosopher that wishing well to other would not be just benevolence, since friendship is an activity that requires at the same time reciprocity and recognition, something that is not present in benevolence. However, the Stagirite realizes that such men are rare and how friendship is a activity, a kind of virtue that needs time to become effective, and that in this way the need for closeness and trust is fulfilled, so that justice can be the depository of mutual esteem, and consequently this type of friendship is also scarce, in addition to not being exempt from the possibility of being corrupted by the time. For Aristotle, friendship can overcome distances, but not for long time, because friendship is an act that is updated every day. It combines character and action, or that is, in addition to morality, habit is also required. Therefore, conviviality is one of the conditions for the solidification and updating of friendship between friends. For Aristotle 1984, 1158b. 25 Friendship between parents and children, between brothers, friendship between husband and wife, between the older man and the younger, between the sovereign and subjects, or even between master and slave, are friendly relations disproportionate and should be governed in such a way that the best should receive more love of what it gives, just as it should be more useful, so that a certain equality between the parties. However, our author states that when a relationship is between a being very superior and another very inferior, there is no possibility of friendship, as in the case between men and the gods. He also remembers that there is a phenomenon that escapes above-mentioned sentence, the case of maternal love, since the mother gives to her children more love than these, being that she is the superior part in the relationship with her children. Aristotle also asserts that friendship between unequals is based on utility or in pleasure, since inferiors seek that which will make them superior or, at least, out of the condition of inferiority. Marcos Tsiano 2007, page 469. In the famous text Estudos de Ética Antigua makes an interesting observation about the good and the purpose of the relationships between men in Aristotle. According to him, every good that results from a relationship of friendship is apparent, even the one related to perfect friendship, which would denote that Aristotle and the Nicomachean ethics plunges the good definitively into the dark realm of intentionality, and also that, because every good, true or false, is only conceived as such in an inevitably intentional context, in which something is taken in a certain title. What takes ordinary man is not true good. However, both are forever condemned to the opaque world of intentions. This is why, in the Nicomachean ethics, the man par excellence virtuous, the prudent, is presented as if he were the norm and the criterion of our actions. The field of intentionality is the crucial point for the Kantian moral doctrine 5. What we can see here is that according to Tsiano's thesis, Aristotle already foresaw in this its radicalization in pointing out the good as an end in which man places himself as goal, the problem of the intention of a moral action. 5. Note: Kant intends to found his moral doctrine based on a priori concepts since, for him, we may never know whether the intention of an action is moral or not. End of note. According to Tsiano, Aristotle tried to find a unit for the concept of friendship by relating it to similarities between good, useful and pleasant, but ended up not reducing the three types of friendship to only one and post the three types in an irreducible way, so that friendship relations might resemble it in terms of activity, but not in terms of what its purpose is. Respective object, that is, the end envisaged, is always irreducible in each kind of friendship. For Aristotle, the polis is a political community constituted by communities minors, the family, the warriors, the craftsmen, etc. Each community plays a role or task in the polis, and in which the members cooperate united by the figure that concerns each community specifies. As each smaller community has its purposes distinct and with the purpose of supplying certain needs to life and to each citizen in private, justice and friendship combine in the community, forming and shaping the relations between citizens, whether commercial or personal. However, it is from familiar model that our philosopher will establish an analogy with the models of governments. In fact, for him, the family appears as the very origin of the state. Friendship between parents and children, between children and parents, as well as distributive relationship of activities within the home between husband and wife, it seems guarantee Aristotle the principles to define political friendship. Before, however, he distinguishes three forms of government and their correlated corruptible deviations, and relates them similarly to relationships within the family. The first would be the monarchy, and its degenerate correlate would be tyranny. Both forms are distant from each other and have only one man rule in common. The king has the welfare of his subjects in view, whereas the tyrant looks only to his own interests. This constitution model can similarly be found in the relationship between parents and their children, that is, A good father should provide superior goods for his children. Therefore, it claims Aristotle 1984, 1161 81520. And such is the friendship of a father, though he exceeds another in greatness of the benefits dispensed, as it is the cause of the existence of the children, the which everyone considers the greatest of goods, just as he provides for his food and education. All this is usually attributed to the grandparents. And further, that by nature a father tends to govern his children, grandparents to descendants and kings to their subjects. The second model of constitution would be the aristocracy and its deviation from oligarchy. Analogously, we would have the relationship between the husband and his wife, since the man governs as befits his worth, but leaves his affairs to his wife that belong to a woman. Aristoteles 1984, 1160b-35. In this model, the functions of the ruler is distributed as it happens in the home, where the husband grants the woman tasks that compete with her. When this does not happen, there is degeneration in the government, because the rulers govern the state by assigning public positions to those who does not have the competence to do so. The other model is timocracy, which is ruled by all, which seeks to make all citizens equal. Its deviation would be democracy. Indeed, Aristotle does not define the corruption of timocracy. He only indicates that the democracy would be a slight deviation from the worst form of government, and similarly both would resemble the philia between brothers, since there is equality between them, except when there is a discrepant age difference. Aristotle does not fail to observe that in democracy there are great possibilities for philia and justice to occur among the citizens of broadly, since this model requires equality among all, which will not occur in the other degenerate regimes, because there is almost no justice, and where there is no justice there is no friendship. Article recorded February 2, 2023, by Sybil Mann Baylor, for educational sharing. The Greek philosopher also asserts that unanimity is similar to friendship policy, because unanimity is what aims at a kind of normalization of common interests of citizens in the polis. Therefore, unanimity is required among the good men, as they wish to keep their interests in line with what is fair and advantageous for the city and consequently for themselves, since the efforts between citizens in the community are shared, divided, or summed. Such the weight of friendship. Political friendship or unanimity maintains a certain balance in relations public, since these aim at justice in the common interest, which does not occur between evil men who aim at good selfishly and who can't bring the city to ruin. In the words of Aristotle 1984, 1167b-5, unanimity seems, then, to be political friendship, as, in fact, it is generally considered, for it deals with things that are ours interest and influence in our lives. Now, such unanimity is found among good men, for these are unanimous both with themselves and with each other and have, so to speak, one thought. More than 20 centuries separate the thought of Kierkegaard and Aristotle. The first lived under the radicalism of pietistic Christian doctrine between 1813 and 1855 and built his philosophy under the aegis of Christianity, while the latter lived exactly in the period that came to be called paganism. However, The Danish philosopher does not shy away from constantly returning to the philosophy of the pagan classical age, whether to maintain a controversial dialogue, whether to incorporate philosophical concepts from paganism to his philosophy. But with regard to the notion of friendship, Kierkegaard contrasts, even then tensely, with that present in Aristotle's thought. Kierkegaard is not an eminently political thinker, as he was measured of Aristotle, but was concerned with the individual in his particular sphere and subjective, in the concreteness of man's existence, and gave interiority and faith a prominent place in his philosophy. However, he faced an insoluble problem of modernity. Man between the private and the public, the individual and the community, the which led him to write the kind of ethical treatise, the works of love. And I say kind, therefore, it is not a rigid and scholastic conceptual system, since it is full of literary images, allegorical and theological metaphors, but that is not why we should understand Kierkegaard as an irrationalist, as some readers who pass by your eyes quickly on your writings. In the works of love, Kierkegaard sets himself the task of thinking about the individual-to-individual relationship and has on its horizon a debate with what was proposed by Aristotle in his investigation of friendship. According to Aristotle, for there to be friendship between people, there must be reciprocity and recognition. Such requirement is for the Greek something positive that underlies the relations personal and political, but, for the philosopher from Copenhagen, the relations between individuals that are based on reciprocity do not go beyond selfishness, since, for him, the reciprocity and recognition are not sufficient requirements to safeguard the individual of egocentrism, since in extreme situations, statements about who has more merit always come into play and end up corrupting the relationship. Therefore, the Kierkegaardian proposal is that the relations between individuals have as basis the Christian love-agate that is free, disinterested, expects nothing in return, i.e., does not there is a demand for reciprocity or recognition. In this way, we share the thinking of Sergio Munoz Franeca 2010, p. 46. The requirement is ethical because it impels man to see in the other a similar, to eliminate differences and contribute to the well-being of others, to see the good in him, and to bring him into a positive relationship and self-sufficient. Love becomes a radical demand, for the individual can't transcend his egocentrism. But Kierkegaard is not referring to love in the traditional sense of the word, but of Christian love that has nothing to do with a special form of relationship, but extends to all types of relationships, or that is, this love becomes the first in any relationship. Beyond in addition, Kierkegaard refers to works of love. Making love becomes the action, a permanent task of realization that impact positively the others. The works of love had in its genesis a historical context marked by great social transformations. Europe was going through conflicts of a political and social. The clash between socialists and liberals dominated the scenario of political intolerance, social as well as religious. Wary of both positions that leaned from one side for the homogenization of the individual and on the other for a human objectification, Kierkegaard decides to write about the duty and charity of love in order to think about the human relations. Starting from a Christian perspective, he makes an interpretation about of the Christian commandment "you must love your neighbor" that escaped the philosophical writings of the time. making this Christian imperative the object of a long analysis in the form of a speeches about love and seeking to build an ethical religious proposal. Consider the text of the second philosophical journey, in which Kierkegaard sought direct communication by signing their texts without using the recurrent resource pseudonymous. It is structured in 2 moments, the speeches of the first part, which analyze the commandment of love of neighbor, and the second, which deal with the charity of love. According to Alvaro Valls, Kierkegaard aims to re-establish concepts that define the meaning of original Christianity. That is, it wants to rescue the truth of the Christianity lost to history. Being a Christian in modernity can mean being the one who lives dominated by habit and does not live according to the commandment love your neighbor like yourself. In this way, Kierkegaard elaborates categories such as Christic, who would be the one who lives according to the divine commandment, loving his neighbor as himself and himself as his neighbor. That would be the essence of true Christian, who lives Christianity in an interior way, accepting the duty to love God and the next. Another concept is that of Christianity, which concerns those who call themselves Christians, but who live Christianity objectively, externally and without passion. Kierkegaard intends to elevate man to the sphere of transcendence, that is, to divine sphere, and put the Christian back into a different relationship with the world. Love your neighbor as the divine commandment dictates is to place oneself before the divine. Therefore the love praised by Kierkegaard is opposed to natural love of predilection, is opposed to that which presupposes a choice and which has similarity as a condition, that is, the love is rather love as a duty. He reminds us that the commandment "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as yourself" presupposes that man loves himself and must love his everyone as himself, i.e. the love he praises is by no means selfish. In demanding love for others, one should not love excessively. Self-love is the measure. True love is directed towards the whole human race. However, Kierkegaard he is not a dogmatist. It is necessary to believe in this divine love that is realized in the relationship between me and the you. For Kierkegaard, divine love can only be known through its fruits, through his works, for he has a hidden life and reveals himself, manifests himself in the need to be recognized, and this is done by the fruits, as well as the thought that is revealed in the expression of speech. This is the Christian love that moves and has eternity in us. We cannot know the origin of love, since it is mysteriously based on love, God's. Therefore, it is only possible to know the fruits of the one who believes in love. Only the one who abides in love can know love even as his love must be known. Kierkegaard, 2007, page 20. For Stephen Evans, 2004, page 122. Divine commands are the basis for becoming thinking about a certain moral obligation that is realized in an ethical life that wants to become relate to God, and who thus may be capable of self-actualization, but who requires an obedience to divine commands. And further, in As Obras do Amor this type of vision is concrete. The self I become and the divine command I must obey are both specified in terms of biblical teachings on love. I'm commanded to love my neighbor as myself, and only when I learn to love this way I can become the self that I was created to be and really want to be. Although in my life sinful, this is always the one I'm running away from. I can only love my neighbor as myself when I have one relationship with God, who becomes the middle ground in every love relationship. True loving one's neighbor is not exhausted or reduced by forms human natures have long, such as erotic love and friendship. The Danish philosopher's suggestion is based on the Christian love that contemplates the way of relating to the other based on alterity. The duty of loving one's neighbor implies an ethical task, and this task orders a whole set of actions to address the next. The Dane claims that the neighbor is a reduplication. The as thyself contained in the divine law rules out the possibility of a selfish love, because the egoic man does not support the idea of reduplicity. The next is the another you, not a second me, but a first you. The thou shalt is eternal and must deny the willful love. In this way Kierkegaard 2007, page 77 asserts, love of neighbor cannot become one with neighbor, in a unified identity. Love of neighbor is love between two beings eternally determined as spirit each for himself. Love to neighbor is love according to the spirit, but two spirits can never becomes one, in the selfish sense. Only in the love of neighbor, the self himself, who loves, determines himself in a purely spiritual way as spirit, and the next is a purely spiritual determination. In this way, there is in Kierkegaard's thought a clear concern with the alterity of the individual, with a love that is concretized in a duty that has as its measure its own subjectivity. Christian love is free from anguish and despair. It is eternal and therefore higher. True love is the one that is sure of the vicissitudes of time. Natural love is the one sung by the poet, fleeting, ephemeral, selfish, who seeks in the other what is lacking, is a needy, dependent love. With indeed, only when love is a duty does it become perfect, free from anguish, from despair that settles in the loss and dependency caused by natural love. Being thus, thou shalt love. Only when love is a duty, only then is love eternally insured against any change, eternally free in blessed independence, eternally and happily protected against despair. Kierkegaard, 2007, page 45. However, reminds the Copenhagen thinker that the starting point of the doctrine of Christian love cannot be erotic love. In the doctrine of Christian love, eroticism starts to take place in consciousness, because, before maintaining a relationship of predilection, it is first necessary to be aware if the favorite is rather a neighbor. Not Kierkegaard denies the erotic dimension present in the relationships between individuals, but the erotic can be superior to Christian love. According to Evans, Kierkegaard is a combative thinker even when the subject is love, and his controversy here turns against three figures: the intact pagan, the corrupted or impure, and the deluded. The first is a concept that Kierkegaard relates with paganism in classical antiquity before the advent of Christianity, and in which it will have on the horizon to contrast with the contemporary paganism where the other figures take place. The Dane radicalizes his criticism against the latter and maintains a dubious and tense relationship with the former despite rejecting all notions of love and friendship present in the pagan culture of the ancient Greeks. The figure of the heathen corrupted is identified with secularized man, as stated by Evans 2006, page 126. The person I designate corrupted heathen can best be described as a kind of secular, emancipated thinker who tries to understand the substance of Judeo-Christian ethics without the foundation. This thinker is different from the intact pagan who finds the idea of law as an absurd commandment. The corrupt heathen learned from Christianity that loving is a duty. The difference between this view and the genuine Christianity is that the moral law is seen by the pagan corrupted like something we don't need God to get. We note, as well as Evans, that the secularized man is the result of the movement Enlightenment history that reached its peak in the German philosophy of the 18th century and that culminated for the Copenhagen philosopher in a freedom that was established through the autonomy of reason and which denies faith. This is also a criticism that we can identify as being addressed to Ludwig Forbush, who claimed in his work The Essence of Christianity that the essence of God is the same essence of man. The secularized is the one who wants to put himself in the place of God. However, the same Feuerbach helped Kierkegaard to perceive the figure of the deluded pagan as the one who lives in Christianity, behaves like a pagan, but in a deluded and unhealthy way he thinks he's a Christian. The deluded pagan is the concept by which Kierkegaard interprets the Forbush's anthropological philosophy. The deluded pagan is exactly identified with that man who reduced his essence to the divine. This man is the one who understands that the duty to love is confused with mere natural love, of predilection. That is, he conceives divine love as merely human. It domesticates it. In the Considerations from Evans 2004, page 126. The deluded pagan is the individual who believes that love of neighbor can be identified with naturalness, merely human, and they love celebrated by poets as friendship or romantic love, or in the better possibility of understanding if love of neighbor is seen as something that some have on their side or in addition to these natural ways of love. Christian love is thus, according to Kierkegaard, domesticated. Both Aristotle and Kierkegaard sought to understand the movement that man does to relate to each other and that this activity aims to seek for the highest good. So we believe that despite all the announced contrasts, due in some measure to the different times in which they both lived, they touch each other in a positive way. Aristotle said that friendship is the virtue supreme and annuls selfishness through the common pursuit of two similar men who think and act reciprocally. Kierkegaard, on the other hand, rejects reciprocity. For him, the ethical requirement in the relationship between one man and another is unilateral. The man turns to his interiority, claiming for himself the love absolutely disinterested towards his neighbor, and such a movement is enacted by a moral law transcendent that sees love as an obligation, the divine command of love. It is necessary to emphasize that Kierkegaard does not deny that there can be friendship and reciprocal love of one man towards another. The natural love of predilection must have its place, but the duty to love is a moral obligation, which can be understood, not only as a Christian duty, but it can go further if placed at the beginning of every action. Morality from individual to individual. Article recorded February 2, 2023, by Sybil Mann Baylor, for educational sharing. References: Aristotle, Nicomachean Ethics. In Aristotle, The Thinkers. Sao Paulo, April Culture, 1984. Evans, S. Kierkegaard's Ethic of Love. New York, Oxford University Press. Include 2004. FONNEGRASM. The Ethical Requirement. About Kierkegaard's doctrine of love in Søren Kierkegaard Literature, 1956-2006. A Bibliography. New York: Museum to Skillman Press, 2010. Kierkegaard, Yes, the Works of Love. Petropolis, Editor of Oses, 2007. Zingano. M. Studies in Ancient Ethics. Sao Paulo: Editorial Discourse, 2007.